They called her just a drone operator and laughed when she requested to fly the F-35 Lightning II mission. The veteran fighter pilots at Incirlik Air Base thought some remote pilot couldn't handle real combat over Syria until ISIS surface-to-air missiles lit up the sky, and suddenly, everyone realized the video game player had more close air support experience in actual war zones than their entire squadron combined. At 28 years old, with olive skin weathered by years of Middle Eastern deployments, Maria carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen more combat than most people twice her age. She wore standard flight gear with minimal decorations, her understated appearance marking her as support crew rather than a frontline warrior. The F-35 pilots barely acknowledged her presence as they studied intelligence reports about their next close air support mission. What they didn't know was that Maria had spent the previous 6 years flying unmanned combat air vehicles over some of the most dangerous airspace in the world. Her classified logbook contained over 2,800 hours of combat flight time, including precision strikes against high-value targets in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Her transition from drone operations to manned aircraft training had been part of a pilot shortage program, but her combat record remained buried in classified databases that most pilots would never access. The mission briefing called for close air support for Kurdish ground forces engaged in heavy fighting against ISIS positions near the Turkish border. The F-35's advanced sensors and precision weapons would provide critical support for troops in contact, requiring split-second decisions and surgical accuracy in a complex urban environment. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison led the two-ship formation, a veteran F-16 pilot with over 1,200 hours of combat time who'd recently transitioned to the F-35. His wingman, Major Thompson, had similar credentials and considerable experience in Middle Eastern operations. Both were skilled pilots with impressive combat records, but neither had experience with the kind of precision urban warfare that had become Maria's specialty during years of drone operations. The squadron was short-staffed due to deployment rotations, and Morrison needed an additional pilot to provide adequate coverage for the ground support mission. When Maria volunteered to fill the slot, Morrison's reaction was predictably skeptical. "Vasquez, you're a drone pilot. Flying a real aircraft in combat is completely different from pushing buttons in a trailer," Morrison said during the briefing, his tone carrying the dismissive attitude she'd encountered throughout her career. "Sir, I'm current and qualified in the F-35, and I have extensive experience with close air support in this exact area of operations," Maria replied professionally. Her training records showed completion of all required certifications, though they didn't indicate the scope of her actual combat experience. Morrison shrugged with barely concealed irritation. "Fine, but stay on my wing and follow my lead exactly. This isn't a video game. Real people die when pilots make mistakes." 45 minutes later, all 3 F-35s launched from Incirlik and headed north toward the Syrian border. The formation climbed to 25,000 feet, where they would coordinate with ground controllers and provide precision fire support for Kurdish forces under heavy attack from entrenched ISIS positions. Maria settled into the familiar rhythm of combat operations, her hands moving across the F-35's advanced control systems with unconscious precision. The aircraft's sensor fusion technology felt natural to her, despite months of flying nothing but unmanned platform. Years of combat experience had taught her to process multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining tactical awareness of rapidly changing ground situations. "Striker flight, this is Outpost 7. Came the urgent voice of the ground controller. "We have troops in contact, a danger close situation. ISIS forces are using civilian buildings for cover, and we need precision strikes on multiple targets simultaneously." Morrison acknowledged the call, but his response suggested the routine confidence of someone dealing with a standard close air support request. He hadn't spent years learning that urban combat required different skills than conventional air-to-ground operations. Maria immediately recognized the tactical complexity of the situation. Years of drone operations had taught her to read urban battlefields, understanding how enemy forces used civilian infrastructure for protection while threatening friendly troops. The target area required surgical precision that most pilots found challenging. "Striker lead, I'm seeing multiple heat signatures in the target buildings. Recommend we coordinate simultaneous strikes from different vectors to prevent enemy displacement between attacks," Maria radioed. Morrison checked his targeting display, which showed the general location of enemy forces but lacked the detailed analysis that Maria was providing. "Striker 3. Maintain standard attack profile. We'll engage targets sequentially as they're marked by ground control." Maria realized she was fighting a familiar battle for credibility. Her extensive urban combat experience was classified at levels that prevented her from explaining why she understood Syrian battlefield dynamics better than pilots with superior official records. She continued monitoring the tactical situation, watching enemy movement patterns that indicated preparation for counterattack against Kurdish positions. ISIS forces were using tunnels and covered approaches to mass forces for assault, taking advantage of the time required for sequential airstrikes to reposition for maximum effect. Striker lead. Enemy forces are using the delay between strikes to reposition. They're massing for counterattack in Sector 7. Recommend immediate coordinated engagement to prevent breakthrough. Striker 3. Maintain position. We have the situation under control. 10 minutes later, the situation deteriorated rapidly as ISIS forces launched a coordinated assault on Kurdish positions, using the exact tactics and timing that Maria had predicted. Enemy forces had used the sequential attack pattern to avoid airstrikes while preparing their own offensive operation. Striker Flight Outpost 7, we're being overrun. Enemy forces are attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. Morrison realized that his standard tactics had been anticipated and countered by an enemy that understood American air support procedures. The ISIS forces had used his predictable approach to their tactical advantage, timing their assault to exploit gaps in air coverage. Maria was already maneuvering her F-35 into position for precision strikes that would disrupt the enemy assault. Striker lead. I'm engaging priority targets. Recommend you coordinate with my strikes to achieve maximum suppression effect. Striker 3, I'm flight lead. Execute only authorized targets. But Maria had already begun a complex series of precision strikes that used the F-35's advanced sensors to identify and engage enemy forces while avoiding civilian casualties. Her attacks were coordinated with ground movement and timed to disrupt enemy tactics before they could achieve tactical success. The ISIS assault began to falter as Maria's strikes eliminated key command positions and disrupted communication between attacking units. Her understanding of urban warfare tactics allowed her to identify critical targets that other pilots might miss, using precision weapons to achieve maximum tactical effect with minimal collateral damage. Outpost 7, enemy assault is breaking up. Excellent fire support. How did you know exactly where to hit them? Morrison watched in amazement as Maria systematically dismantled the enemy offensive using tactics he'd never seen before. Her precision and tactical awareness were turning a potential disaster into a decisive victory for friendly forces. The engagement continued for 30 minutes, with Maria providing the kind of surgical close air support that could only come from extensive experience in urban combat environments. Her strikes were precisely coordinated with ground tactics and timed to achieve maximum psychological as well as physical effect on enemy forces. After landing at Incirlik, Morrison approached Maria with questions that had been building throughout the mission. Vasquez, where did you learn to fight like that? That wasn't standard close air support procedure. Maria secured her aircraft and gathered her flight gear before answering. Sir, I've been providing close air support in this region for 6 years. The tactics work regardless of whether you're flying manned or unmanned platforms. 6 years? You're a drone pilot. How long have you been flying combat missions? For the first time, Maria's professional demeanor shifted slightly. Sir, unmanned combat air vehicles conduct the same missions as manned aircraft. The only difference is where the pilot sits. Morrison stared at her, processing implications he was only beginning to understand. You're telling me you have more combat experience than most of our squadron? I'm telling you that some platforms get more combat time than others, and some experience transfers directly to any aircraft capable of precision strike operations. The mission debrief revealed that Maria had conducted 47 precision strikes during the engagement, all successful with 0 civilian casualties. Her tactical analysis of enemy behavior had allowed her to predict and counter ISIS tactics that had surprised more experienced pilots. Word of the mission spread quickly through the coalition air forces operating from Incirlik. The story of the drone pilot who'd outfought ISIS using F-35 technology became required study material for pilots transitioning to urban close air support operations. The next week, Morrison specifically requested Maria for all high-risk close air support missions. Her ability to read urban battlefields and coordinate precision strikes proved invaluable for supporting ground forces in the complex Syrian operational environment. But Maria never sought recognition for her extensive combat background. She understood that drone operations often remained classified and that some of the most effective warriors were those whose contributions couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Her transition to manned aircraft provided opportunities to use her tactical expertise in new ways while maintaining the operational security that her previous missions required. During tactical briefings for new F-35 pilots deploying to the Middle East, she would often remind them that modern close air support required understanding ground tactics as well as flying skill. The F-35 is the most capable multi-role fighter ever built, she would tell them, but it's only as effective as the pilot's understanding of what's happening on the ground. Technology is a tool. Tactical knowledge is what makes the tool effective. Months later, when coalition forces launched major operations against ISIS strongholds, American close air support relied heavily on urban warfare tactics that Maria had perfected during years of unmanned combat operations. Her understanding of enemy behavior and urban battlefield dynamics proved critical for achieving tactical success while minimizing civilian casualties. Years later, F-35 pilots throughout the region would credit Maria with revolutionizing their approach to urban close air support. They learned that the most valuable combat experience often came from platforms they'd never considered, and that expertise in modern warfare existed in forms that traditional fighter pilots might not recognize. The F-35 Lightning II continued to dominate multi-role operations throughout the Middle East, flown by pilots who understood that their technological advantages required tactical sophistication to achieve maximum effectiveness. They learned that the most dangerous assumption was dismissing experience that came from different platforms or unconventional backgrounds. Maria's contributions to coalition air operations remained largely unrecognized in official records, but her influence on tactical doctrine ensured that every F-35 pilot benefited from lessons learned during thousands of hours of actual combat operations. She had chosen mission success over personal glory, understanding that the most critical victories were often achieved by people whose expertise was gained in ways that didn't fit traditional career patterns.